You're listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by NACS. Whether it's for food, fuel, drinks, or snacks, about half of the U.S. population shops at a convenience store every day. We'll talk about what we see at stores and what the future may hold for our industry.
Over 40 million U.S. consumers fill up every day at the pump, mostly at C-stores. And additionally, over 86% of them use a credit or debit card to pay. And therein lies the core issue related to EMV at the pump. You see, non-EMV card readers are highly susceptible to fraud. Thus, it's critically important that gas stations, convenience stores prepare to fully implement EMV capabilities at their pumps and convenience stores. Why is that? Well, sit tight. Coming up, we'll discuss that and more. Welcome to Convenience Matters. I'm Donovan Woods with the Fuels Institute and NACS, and I'm joined by my co-host,
Jeff Lenard with NACS. Today, Donovan and I are going to talk about what you need to know about EMV, the deadlines, and what it means when today most people are paying by plastic. And for our conversation, we're joined by two folks with Sound Payments. First off, we have Ray Prothero, who is VP of Products at Sound Payments, and also Bill Pittman, who is Senior Vice President of the Petro Group at Sound Payments. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So when we look at the whole issue of EMV, can you just give us a broad overview about what we're looking at and the economics? And we'll start with you, Bill, looking at what are the economics and the cost of non-compliance, something that Donovan teed up in the introduction to this.
Yeah, so we went through this in the retail world a few years ago where they mandated EMV and they shifted the liability. And I think most people have probably heard that the liability shift has now been moved to April of 2021. But what happens is that now the business becomes liable for any chargebacks versus before it went back to the issuing bank. And so that creates a potentially economic problem for the business, especially in something like Petro, where it's been fraught kind of with chargebacks and fraud for years, and so there's a huge economic impact that's going to happen to the convenience stores. It's almost like they don't have a choice, because if they don't do it, what happens is, and this is what happened in retail, is the bad guys find out who's not upgraded, and then they go and target them, and then they get in even worse trouble. And so the cost of non-compliance for a business is going to be huge. There's millions of dollars right now in fraud that happens in Petro, and as a store, they haven't bared the cost of that. But with this new law, with this new rule from Visa and MasterCard, they're going to have to bear it. And so it could easily put a business out of business pretty quickly if they're not compliant. So then the question becomes, what are your options and how do you comply? And that's one of the things we want to talk about.
And Ray, just to follow up, in talking about EMV, and the deadline has been moved, and just to be clear, this is different than Y2K. This is not something that may or may not happen, and you probably should get prepared. This is something that will happen. So can you walk us through the urgency of doing this now? Now, we know that here we are in the middle of 2020, and everything has been turned upside down. Everything we thought was normal is not normal now. We're dealing with daily crises, things shifting, but it's also important to pay attention to the short-term future and how this might play out with the due date. Can you talk a little bit about that, Ray?
Sure. So it comes down to a basic supply and demand principle behind it. What's needed for compliance with this change is changes to the actual devices and software that run at existing pumps today. So what ends up happening is there's a run on the number of resources out in the field that can do this kind of work. The qualified technicians that are allowed to go into pumps and make those necessary changes to comply with the mandate. pumps, I don't know if you've ever opened one up, but they're pretty complex inside. I mean, there's a lot of wires and blinking lights, and that's just the electronics, not to mention the actual hydraulics and whatnot that pump the gas. So, these resources are limited quantity, and as we move closer to that deadline, there's going to be a shortage of their availability to the field. And what that means is that the merchants that are looking to get upgraded or changed over, they're not going to have the resources needed to do so, and ultimately they'll miss the deadline, and potentially a fraud event could occur, which would cost them lots of money, like Bill was talking about. So that's really what's driving it is the scarcity of resources, as we move further down the road, and having the qualifications to do the kind of work that's needed to be done for changing over.
So, Bill, this is Donovan. A question for you to kind of go back to what Ray just mentioned. It's a two-part question, so bear with me. You talked about there being an economics of not doing this. So how much money are we talking was actually lost last year?
Well, so from the studies I've looked at, there's over $400 million done in chargebacks last year.
Wow. Okay. All right. So let's now with that as an answer.
That feels like a parking ticket too. I mean, that's like one. It's not like you're buying a new appliance or so. You're getting something new. It's just a pure cost. And I think also you've heard from retailers is you have to remember that with these chargebacks after the deadline, you still have to be compliant because we will still have issues related to fraud. So it's like getting parking tickets and then buying the radar detector or something like that. You're still going to be on the hook for what you've already incurred. Sorry to interrupt there, Donovan.
No. And I think that helps with the perception, because if that's the case of how much this is going to cost and it's not going to go away, maybe it's good to know how much is it going to cost us to actually update my pumps? What goes into that?
Well, I think that's one of the things we're going to talk about. There's a bunch of different options, and I think Ray's going to go over them. And there's, anywhere from buying brand new pumps to trying to retrofit your existing pumps. But I think that's Ray's going to go over that.
Right. So there are a few different options out there. There's the replacement of the physical pump itself, which in and of itself can require things like construction and certificates from local municipalities for doing that kind of work, as well as just the overall cost of doing that construction and that changeover to a new pump. As an alternative method, though, there's a design called retrofitting, and basically what that is where you replace the existing terminals or payment devices at the pumps with new payment readers, and they're designed to fit with each of the types of models that are out there in the field. Typically, we've seen that the savings on doing a retrofit versus a pump replacement can be anywhere from 20 to 60% over full replacement, and that's just the cost of the hardware itself, not to mention any kind of additional construction work that may need to be involved in doing so. And then often these kits, or rather these retrofits, can be done with or without kitting. And by kitting, I mean typically when you get a new product, it's got to fit in the form factor of wherever you're installing it. So, there's products in the market that will allow for you to do some minor customization of the hardware, such that you can reuse the existing hardware that's out there, and only have to plug in the devices for operation. They also most don't require POS software upgrades. That can be implemented with the existing POS that's in the environment. And then, from a business perspective, or from a operations perspective, it's typically less downtime for the business. Solutions that allow a tech to install one pump at a time, and therefore it can leave the business operational while that process, while you're getting that radar detector or your license to operate, for lack of a better term, in the new ecosystem.
So you mentioned, which is a good point, the down point or the downtime due to construction. And then you mentioned also the savings you could have with a retrofit. So could one of you give us just an average of what it actually costs to replace?
Yeah, so this is Bill. So just, what I've been told, the average cost to replace a new pump is anywhere from $12,000 to $15,000 per pump. And then, like I said, like Ray mentioned, is you have to go downtime where the store's out of business while you're replacing it. The nice thing about a retrofit kit option is that the business doesn't have to go down because you can do one pump at a time.
Got it. Okay, that helps a lot. Because I'm assuming as a retailer who's listening, they understand it's an urgency, but now they got to really look and factor what's the cost and is the cost worth the penalty that they could be facing. So I appreciate that. That really helps.
So let me pick that up talking about the retrofit because to me, no question, this has been a challenging year for all retail channels with less money being spent, less driving, a lot of challenges out there. Some are weathering this better than others, but when you're looking at how do you handle all these costs when it's been a tough year, there are definitely some advantages in looking at something like retrofit, where you can still get what you need, but it might be a little bit more affordable. So, I want to ask you, Ray, what are some of the specific benefits in retrofitting beyond the potentially lower price tag?
So there's a couple different technical differences between, if we want to kind of move away from the cost aspect and look at more of the implementation and operational effects of changing over. There's two different models that exist out there in the market. There's a model called the fully integrated solution, and that's where it's essentially a replacement of the existing terminal and software that runs, and it relies on the POS and the existing electronic payment processor to conduct the transaction for the pump. It also relies on the communication integrity of the site. So older sites, they can sometimes have issues with wiring and signal capabilities to their pumps, and with doing a fully integrated solution, that wiring has to be in place in order for it to operate effectively. It also involves taking the site down for installation. Even if you're just doing a fully integrated terminal replacement scenario for a retrofit kit, you have to take the site down to install those terminals, because chances are those terminals are real-time operational with the environment that they're existing in, and in order to remove and replace what was once on a pump with a new terminal or a new payment device, you're going to need to take the system down so it doesn't think that there's something going on with the communication mechanism. And then architecturally speaking, the fully integrated solutions tend to be more closed in their nature. They're more proprietary. So it's harder to get enhancements, thinking more forward and thought here. It's hard to get enhancements installed and added to the system without fully affecting the entire environment that's involved. PCI is, we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but PCI it covers that whole ecosystem for the POS and the terminals and the fully integrated solution. So any changes that happen in the field require the entire system to be reapproached or relooked at for any security implications, and that in and of itself can cost a lot of time and energy to develop and plan and implement in the field. Now, on the flip side, there's another option out there, which is something that we sell, but it is an option that we've put in the market. It's called semi-integration. And with the semi-integration semi-integrated solution, rather, there's no reliance on the point of sale for payment. The terminal itself, or the payment terminal in the pump, it goes direct to the processor for all of its payment capabilities. So it hides or shields the payment card data from the rest of the POS architecture in the store, and thus kind of reduces the overall footprint of the PCI implications from the store environment. Often these semi-integrated solutions will use end-to-end encryption. So, and what that means is from the time the card is inserted to the terminal through the authorization and back to the actual fueling and completion, the card's data is never exposed to any of the store environment. So that payment transaction and cardholder information is encrypted from end to end and transacts with the processor without ever exposing itself to the rest of the store system. So it's an increase in security overall for the store. The semi-integrated solutions also, they interface directly to the forecourt or the pump controller. So again, you're not having to try to integrate with a POS and all of the other applications that may exist in an environment. Instead, your mandate or your guiding principle is to control the fuel. So when they communicate directly to the forecourt controller, they're able to turn pumps on and off depending on the need, and thus kind of eliminate the integration headaches that often come with a new solution that's fully integrated out there in the market. And then finally, I guess is a kind of overarching, forward-thinking mindset is they're scalable by design. You can easily add new features to a semi-integrated solution that you typically can't with a fully integrated solution, simply because, as you add applications, you're not affecting the payment processing capabilities. What you're doing is just you're essentially just communicating with the existing architecture through what we call tokenization. And that tokenization allows you to transact on the terminal without impacting the PCI aspects of sharing the payment information with the rest of the system. Other benefits. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. One other thing I throw out there is because the device that we're actually, some of these people that are doing semi-integrated solutions, the device that you're putting out in the pump is actually PCI certified. So if anybody tampers with it, tries to change it or open it up or do anything with it, the thing self-destructs. So it's a much, the whole approach of semi-integration with EMV is a much more secure solution from my perspective.
So following up on something that you said, Ray, talking about the benefits, convenience stores sell time. Technically, we sell convenience, but convenience is time. We solve your time related problems. And I would imagine that there's some benefit when you talk about the semi-integrated or the retrofitting, where the time length that your pump is down is different than a different type of look at getting PCI compliance. Can you talk about some of the time elements, because these things don't get retrofitted at 3 a.m. The repairmen, the installation people are sleeping just like we are. It's during normal business hours when things are most busy. So is there a time consideration when you look at the options available?
From a when it can be done, it can be with a semi-integrated solution, it can be done pretty much any time in the day. The typical full install, if you're kind of working backwards from the completion back down to the site, the guy just showed up on the site. The typical install for a semi-integrated solution can be 1 to 4 hours total for the entire store, and that gets them fully PCI compliant at the pump. What that means is essentially an installer will go out to a store. They will take one pump down, or in some cases one side of a pump down. They'll disconnect the existing terminal that's there, if there is one, or if not, they'll install a new terminal, the PCI semi-integrated solution. and they'll connect it up. And oftentimes it's as simple as that. They'll turn it on, and boom, at least that pump is off and running. And then they just repeat that process for each of the pumps that are in the field. With our semi-integrated solution, we actually pre-configure the terminal before it actually gets to the store. So it makes it even simpler in that all they literally are doing is plugging in a couple of wires, making sure there's network connectivity, and they're off and running with PCI. So to address the question of time, the time with a semi-integration is a lot shorter and a lot less challenging from a planning and management perspective than it would be for a full integration type of an environment.
Well, it seems like we could ask more questions, get more detail, and we could keep going on. And it truly proves the point that being a convenience store owner, running these equipment and being compliant is not for the faint of heart. It's a very important thing to get this done. But now, if you could give us more information, because we don't have a lot of time left, can you tell us where our listeners can get more information on all of these things?
Bill, you want to handle that one?
Well, we have a website, www.soundpayments.com. Also, you've got my email, which is bill.p@soundpayments.com, and Ray is ray.r@soundpayments.com.
Ray.p@soundpayments.com as well. And we'll be happy to share and provide additional information and all the requirements and prerequisites, if any, needed for getting a site and a store owner up and running.
Yeah, so we have a whole process of going through an evaluation and figuring out what the stores they got today and how we can fit in there and what that needs to do to make them compliant. And so I've got a whole team that's what they do.
Perfect. That's exactly what we needed. And just for emphasis, they can find information at www.soundpayments.com. And then your emails again, you want to give those again, Ray?
Sure. Ray.p@soundpayments.com and bill.p@soundpayments.com.
Perfect. Well, we thank both of you for being with us today and helping our audience truly understand how important this is to be prepared before April 2021 and to get on this as soon as possible. And again, if there are questions, they can reach out to you at www.soundpayments.com. We appreciate you both being here, Ray. Thank you, Bill. We appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. My pleasure.
Absolutely.
And thank you for listening to Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.